Club on 947.
Monday to Friday,
Listen every morning.
6 to 9 a.m.
Hold up, I just wanna have a good night,
Night Pulse,
With Bolele and Msizi on 947.
Monday to Thursday.
7 to 10
This
is 947.
In the building right now, we're talking all things politics. We're talking, of course, election season is here. Registration weekend is here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the studio Zimasa, Mustafa. Do you prefer Zimasa or Mustafa? Mustafa for the screen.
It's but like Zimasa for like official.
Oh, the serious thing.
Official, yeah.
Okay. Mustafa is what we'll go with because we're having fun here, my brother. We're having fun with you.
Right? Off air even.
Exactly. But Zimasa, thank you for joining us, brother.
Yeah.
The first time I met you was at a political gathering, so it makes sense that we'd come here and talk about politics. I know that you're very much clued up at what's going on, and you speak, like I was saying to Bolele, you speak at a digestible level.
Yeah.
Even just now, he was speaking to us off air about things going on. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah, and it makes so much more sense. Like, the information doesn't feel intimidating. You know, sometimes you come across so much information and it's just like, oh my goodness, how do I process all this? Where do I even start to begin to understand what I'm consuming?
Yeah.
So you've just made it so simple. I like it.
So let's get into it, man.
Yeah.
This year, big pivotal year as far as elections are concerned. One of the things we always hear is that the youth don't want to come out.
Yeah.
And they're disillusioned about voting. Is this year going to be any different? What's the data saying around youth involvement as far as elections are concerned?
Super interesting. Obviously, IEC briefing was today. They say we hit a record, 27 million people are registered, but I always look at it and I go, but who shows up is more important,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And then to answer your question relative to the youth, data just clearly shows us the youth won't go to vote. Like, if I was a betting man, right, I'd basically bet on the youth not showing up.
Again.
That's the truth, guys.
Again.
This is the
After
truth.
all these years.
1 is a dot, 2 is a line, 3 is a trend. There have been more than 3 elections, and the youth at all of those elections have not shown up. And every year, when we leave elections, we go, where was the youth? Right? Every single year. Articles come out.
Yeah.
Guys, it's 30 to 39, though, is one of the highest registration demographics. Now, that actually backs up the data that says most people stop being aloof at 30 to 39 because there are consequences to you not being politically active. You are now buying your first house.
Exactly.
You are now your first kid. You are now worried about the price of things for longer than like 2 days saying, what are we doing this weekend, right?
Yeah.
So now suddenly you go, hold on, I can change stuff. So the 30 to 39 is still following the trend. So that's where we are right now.
So what do you think it is about the youth? Is it simply, like you're saying, they're not invested because in your as we say,
Lack of responsibility.
We don't care. We're not paying for our mortgages. We don't care the inflation rate. What does that mean to me? Is that why? Or is it maybe political parties that are just not appealing to them?
So chicken and egg, right? So chicken and egg. So it's like the youth is always complaining that they're not being prioritized, but at the same time, the youth is not voting. So it's like, would you as a business person invest in a product that is not going to give you a return? No, you wouldn't. So you pay lip service to the youth because we know the youth is not going to vote. It's all posturing. We're posturing to each other. It's rhetoric. You know, the youth is the future. The youth is definitely the future. We're going to make sure that they're fine. It doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. And I'm not being a doomsday naysayer. I'm saying the vital demographic is 30 to 39 and going forward, right, up to 65 and. Anything below is a plus for political parties.
So it's our fault.
Yes.
As the youth.
But at the same time, chicken and egg, right? At the same time, the youth is not going out there, but they're not being prioritized.
And they're being affected by everything that's happening in the country,
100%.
right? So then how then do we get to a point where we actually then start to change that and try to encourage the youth then to start to participate?
I think it's tough, right? Because let's take a step back so that you can make it maybe understand a little bit better.
Sure.
You need to understand what it takes in order for a young person to become civically active within the political space. You need funding in this country, right? You need to dedicate your life to that in terms of service. You need to then still live as a human. So it costs a lot of money for the person. So if somebody, that's why people are career politicians, because you become into that space, and that space then starts to sustain you financially, economically. Thus, you are comfortable to stay in that space, right? But if you are somebody who's leaving corporate, and we're saying you'd be a great minister of communication, you'd be awesome at minister of infrastructure, do we expect this guy to leave an 800 to 900K a year salary, sacrifice his family as maybe a 33, 34-year-old, to go into this thing that needs you to be on the ground and get a base of people, but also fall into a political system that already is turning, a machine that's turning, and hoping that those people will have a voice and climb up that system? Guys, the truth is simple. If we feel that politicians are criminals in this country, then we've got to say to ourselves, the criminals are getting up every morning and are in politics, but the good people are not. That's why we're always going to be creating these type of politicians.
It's so funny you say that, because I always say that the best often are not in politics.
Yes.
And it's because we can't attract them
100%.
into politics. I mean, like you say, perhaps the highest paid job in Johannesburg as far as politics is concerned is a city manager, right?
3-point-something million.
But if the equivalent in corporate is much higher, you look at somebody who's managing the same budget, let's say Discovery, Adrian Gore is getting hundreds of millions.
Yeah, 100%. So just to even add on to that point, there's a script I'm not completely finished with, and it's for YouTube, where I try to basically say, let's professionalize the state, but let's corporatize it. So if somebody's going to look after things, we should not only have a stick, we should have a carrot for those people. So we should say to them, you get a share of profits based off completed projects that are within a particular band in terms of success rate and quality of execution. Then suddenly you're going to get somebody saying, maybe that road must be built. Because it impacts me, right? We've got boards, right, that look after as SOEs. There's no financial incentive. If we are going to cry that people are stealing money, how are we incentivizing them not to steal?
Yeah, it almost counteracts the idea of mass corruption.
100%.
If I'm getting paid and there's incentives to do better.
Upside. If there's more upside in me, that's the same thing as piracy, guys, right? When we stopped pirating stuff, it was because streaming was affordable. And someone this week said, if streaming becomes unaffordable, we're going back to Pirate Bay.
Oh, there's so much to discuss. There's so much to unpack. I mean, next up we'll talk about political parties, why they're not exciting the youth, and whether or not we should even bother registering and voting this year again. And of course, the one question that everyone has is, what happens? Should the ANC fall below 45? Let's say 45%, because of course 51 is what you need to get to be the majority.
50 plus 1,
50 plus 1. However, if they fall below 45 is when it becomes dangerous territory.
I've got some crazy conspiracies.
Okay, so that's on the way.
Night Pulse.
With Bolele and Msizi on 947.
Monday to Thursday, 7 till 10.
Let's get back to it. We're joined by Zimasa Mustafa on social media. If you're looking for him, we're talking all things, of course, election season, political parties, registration is happening this weekend. All right, I'm sitting at home. I'm 18 to 30, because you said after 30 is when we start being more responsible, right? So 18 to 30, I'm sitting at home going, this thing, no one out there appeals to me. Why would I want to leave my house? Is it worth still getting out of bed on that day, which is Saturday and Sunday, and going to registration?
I think it's always going to be worth it, because you get to take your right and you get to exercise it. Now, let me explain that so that it's not aloof.
Yeah. Okay.
What you actually have is that you are voting about where the country spends its money, how it enacts, and also makes sure that its laws still are there, but also its priorities. Because remember, we've got a party system, and what that party system does is that you vote for a group of people who then will take those views that you feel are closest to what you want, because no political party is going to be 100% to anybody. Then they will champion what you feel is important, or the direction that the country should take. So when you do not vote, what you are saying is that if we were to take the GDP of South Africa, right, the value of all goods and services that the country produces, and we were to divide it by the population that we have, they say 62 million, I think it's maybe closer to 70, but it's fine, right? You then divide that by each person, you get the value of goods and services per individual. Then you take the budget of the country, which is, I think, is a 4 point something trillion. right, and you divide that, then you get your actual value, right, that the government spends on your behalf. There's a stat that says that relative to the debt that South Africans have, everybody owes like between, I think it's at last check, I think it was something like 50 to 80,000 rand, 75,000 rand, depending on how much we're paying off our debts, right? We do 350 something billion interest payments, not on what we owe, the interest on those payments. And it's becoming a large part of our government spending, right? The interest, not even the capital amount, guys. So you owe that amount as a South African. You actually owe that amount. So when a government department overspends, right, because there's not a single government entity that does not overspend. I want this to be clear. Everyone is overspending. They are overspending on your name. They're overspending on your name because somewhere, somehow, the only way that they are looking at raising money is through taxation.
Sure.
Right? It's either they tax you,
The different forms of
companies, or they increase VAT.
VAT. Oh, kuningi.
Because no one's saying let's cut.
No one is saying
No
that.
one's saying-
Why is no party
What?
championing tax cuts?
Because you see, the thing about tax cuts is that we are a welfare state, and we must understand this. We have pushed ourselves into a corner where we have made too many promises that should have had sunsets.
And that's horrible, eh?
Because
it's
you
bad to
find-
be a welfare state.
I'm going to be even more sensational now. RDP housing should have had a sunset. You cannot have somebody who is my age or 40 who has been schooled by the state right through to varsity who expects a house. It's crazy, crazy. And I want people to fight me on this because those who fight me on this are not saying the state should be taking those resources and stimulating growth and trade.
I think exactly the same way you do. I think the fact that we are a welfare state is an embarrassing point. I heard the Secretary General speak about it the other day.
Yes.
As if it was some sort of badge of honor. And I was thinking, we should be ashamed.
Bro.
Our people are not upwardly mobile.
Bro.
The idea that we should rely on those 350s is not something to be proud of as a country.
Which might be which might be 1,000 something now, and then you ask yourself, where does the money come from? When we're asking, right, to fix key industries that assist trade, we have to trade our way out of this. That's why your vote is important.
Absolutely.
You've got to vote people that are not. You've got to vote people out that are not championing what you want.
Okay, let's hear your conspiracy theory. There's radio afterwards.
I think no matter how you cut the cake, I think the African National Congress will be the biggest party still, right?
Yes.
There's the same voter base that probably voted in 2019 is still there. So there's you're not going to be able to do anything there. What's interesting though is what would happen, right? Conspiracy time. What would happen if it drops below 50+1 and it's not able, or it needs to basically create a coalition. What I think could happen, and I want everybody to be sitting down. I think what could happen is that you could actually get a special elective session within the ANC, and I think they could vote out Cyril.
But
he would have lost an election.
But he's the most popular person in the country.
But he would have
politically.
lost an election. I don't think you understand. Remember what I told you about people that are thieves and criminals?
Yeah.
If I don't know how old you guys are, but I lived through 2007.
Yeah, we're
I
both 30
watched
years old. We were in primary school.
Those days in September were harrowing for everybody who didn't know where the country was going.
Sure.
I think that if it happens and we fall, maybe the ANC 50 point something, and then they're still fine. But if it goes below that, I think that we could see a crazy upheaval because the people that have been waiting, right? The people that are maybe a lot more unscrupulous than the ones that you think are now ready. They have a chance. They can easily call a special election and say, but that guy went and lost us an election.
Sure.
And then it would be clear, it would be factual, right? Same thing happened to Musi Maimane. So why would we think that it wouldn't happen in the ANC?
Well, the reason why I don't think you can compare those two things is that Musi was never going to run the country. Where I'm like, the instability
Yes, it's consequential.
Yeah, but the instability that it would create if Cyril Ramaphosa was no longer the president of the ANC, even though they were still the biggest party, I think there'd be a lot more instability there for the country. Musi Maimane was going to be inconsequential in general.
It's the biggest thing that nobody's talking about, but there is a precedence for somebody who has lost an election to be taken out within the political scene. It's like when people first started doing floor crossing, right?
Yes.
When floor crossing happened, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. I was like, you could just change.
Decide to change parties.
But a constituency of people put you there.
Yeah.
You could just swap parties. It was crazy, right? But this is my conspiracy. It doesn't have to be yours. But I think that if you wanted to really capture the state, I think this is the perfect opportunity. If it goes below 50, you then have clear rights to go back to those 4,000 delegates and say to them, that guy has lost us the majority. We need to have another sit down and have a... I get you. Yeah, Ziyakhala.
And people forget that the president is actually elected by the National Assembly.
Yes.
And so that all has to happen around that same time.
And coalitions would be happening at the same time.
Exactly. So there'll be big talks at the same time.
Party A, ANC, goes below, maybe 48, says to another party, bro, we need to be together so we could form a majority, so we can form a government.
Yeah.
But we're going to sort out our things internally. We're going to take this guy out, bring a new cabinet, shave off some of the dead weight. You guys bring us maybe 3 ministers, 4 ministers relative to your weighting. We give you 4 ministerial positions. We take the other, 22, right? But you guys are in there, and then we still form the government. And then maybe we give you a deputy president. I'm just saying.
We are actually starting a podcast. The Night Pulse crew is starting a podcast. Genuinely, we are.
We are.
And so we're going to have you back on for that. So we are not encumbered by anything else.
Sure thing.
But thank you so much, my brother, for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
All is insightful. Go check him out. What are your social handles again?
Mustafa, it's MOOSHTA. Across all of them.
And it's not just political stuff, it's anything socio-economic in this country.
Socio-economic, data-driven. I speak from a factual basis.
Oh, I don't even want this to end. Anyway, for fact's sakes.
I will drive all night.
Night Pulse.
With Bolele and Msizi on 947.
Making the night the best part of your day.